She followed every rule, kept her voice calm, and still got escorted out like a criminal, until her husband showed up and made the airport regret every second of it. Tanya Miles wasn't late. That's what ran through her head when she rolled her small navy suitcase across the tile toward the security line. It was barely noon, and her flight to Phoenix wasn't scheduled for another hour and a half. She had time. Time for a water, maybe a magazine, and a deep breath. It had already been a long week. Her daughter's dentist bills, the last-minute reschedule at work, and now this trip for a client she didn't even particularly like. Still, she was used to handling chaos with grace. That's who she was. The airport felt as airports do. Fast, impersonal, impatient. But Tanya didn't mind. She just kept her head down and followed the signs. After clearing TSA without a problem, she walked toward Gate B6. She noticed a young woman arguing with her toddler about snacks, a man loudly tapping on his phone, and the voice of the gate agent calling out standby names. Normal things? She found a seat near the window and pulled out her book. Then, after about 10 minutes, they began boarding. Group 3 was called. That was her. She stood up, grabbed her roller bag, and stepped into line. When she reached the front, the agent, an older man with thinning blonde hair and a name badge that read K. Delaney, scanned her pass without looking up. "Ma'am, this bag won't fit in the overhead," he said flatly, gesturing to her suitcase. Tanya blinked. "It's a standard carry-on. It's fit on every other flight I've taken this year." Delaney didn't even flinch. "Not on this one. You'll need to check it." She smiled politely. "I don't mean to argue, but I really can't check it. I've got medication in there that needs to stay with me." He looked at her for the first time, and something changed. His eyes narrowed. "You're holding up the line, ma'am," he said, louder this time. Tanya could feel people behind her shifting. Her voice remained calm. "I'm not trying to make this difficult. I just need to keep this bag with me. If you'd like, I can take out the medication and—" "You're being uncooperative," he snapped, cutting her off. That word. It hit her like a slap. "Sir, I'm trying to have a conversation," she replied, still measured. "There's no reason for this to become hostile." He motioned to another employee nearby, a younger woman in uniform. "Get security!" Tanya froze. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" "You're being combative, ma'am. Please step aside." Her heart pounded. She looked around, expecting someone, anyone, to say something, but most avoided her gaze. A few pulled out phones, starting to record. The mother with the toddler clutched her child closer. "Sir, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't swear. I didn't threaten anyone," Tanya said firmly. "Security is on their way. You need to step aside now." She stepped back, hands visible, lips pressed tight. She wasn't going to feed into whatever he was trying to make this into. 2 airport police officers arrived less than a minute later. She gave them the same explanation. They didn't ask many questions. Instead, they told her she was being removed for non-compliance. One officer lightly held her elbow as they escorted her away from the gate. She wanted to scream. Not out of anger, but out of the sheer ridiculousness of it. She'd done nothing. She knew it. Everyone in line knew it. But that didn't matter. They walked her past the other gates, down a corridor, to a small waiting area with blue plastic chairs. One of the officers told her she could wait there, and someone from airport management would come talk to her shortly. Then they left. She sat alone. She looked at her phone. One missed call from Maurice, her husband. She exhaled slowly and dialed him back. He picked up on the first ring. "Maurice." Her voice cracked a little. "What happened?" he asked, his voice sharp and steady. "I got kicked off the flight." A pause. "What?" "Over my carry-on. They said I was being uncooperative." "Where are you now?" "In a holding area near Gate B." "I don't even know. They just walked me here." "Don't move," he said. "I'm already parked." But what happened next made everyone in the waiting area stop and stare. Maurice didn't walk into the terminal. He moved with purpose. Long strides, shoulders square, briefcase in hand. The kind of walk that made people glance twice. He passed by a sandwich kiosk, a group of teenagers dragging skateboards, and a woman trying to juggle coffee and her passport. None of it registered. He spotted Tanya instantly. She was sitting straight, legs crossed, hands clasped tightly on her lap, like she was holding herself together. Her lips didn't move when she saw him, but her eyes said everything. "Hey," Morris said softly, crouching down in front of her. "You okay?" She nodded once, not trusting her voice. He didn't push. Instead, he turned to the nearby desk with the passenger support sign. A young man in a navy vest looked up. "Can I help you?" the agent asked. "Yes," Maurice replied, calm and firm. "My wife was removed from her flight. I'd like to know why, and I'd like to see the footage from the gate area." The agent blinked. "I'm not sure we can do that." "You can. I'm requesting it formally. Now, please get your supervisor." The agent hesitated, then picked up the phone. Back at the chair, Tanya finally exhaled. "I didn't yell, Maurice. I didn't curse. I just didn't want to check my bag." "I know," he said. "You don't have to explain anything to me." Within 5 minutes, 2 supervisors showed up. One wore a name tag that read C. Jensen. The other simply had supervisor stitched into his shirt. They were both smiling, but the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. "Mr. and Mrs. Jensen began. "Miles," Maurice said. "And before we go further, I'd like to state for the record that I'll be requesting all communication, video, and audio related to this incident, as well as the names of every staff member involved." "Sir, I assure you," the other supervisor started. "No need to assure me," Morris said, his voice still measured. "I'm not here for reassurance. I'm here for accountability." The tone in the room shifted. You could feel it. "Can you at least tell us what led to her removal?" Morris asked. "She was uncooperative with the gate agent. She refused to follow a direct instruction to check her bag," Jensen replied, now choosing his words more carefully. "I stated I had medication in the bag," Tanya said quietly. Jensen blinked. "That wasn't relayed to us." "Because no one asked," she said. "No one cared." Morris turned to the supervisors. "Did anyone look in the bag?" "No, sir." "So how do you know she was being unreasonable?" They didn't answer. Around them, travelers began to slow down. A few stopped walking entirely. People were noticing. This wasn't just another airport scene anymore. One woman whispered to a friend, "She's the one they kicked off the plane." Someone else quietly recorded from across the hallway. Morris didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "She's a paying passenger. She followed protocol. And now you've humiliated her. In public. For what? Because someone with a badge decided to escalate instead of de-escalate?" Jensen cleared his throat. "We'll look into the situation more thoroughly." Morris looked him dead in the eye. "I hope so, because I know exactly what the FAA guidelines say. I know what your internal procedures require, and I know what bias looks like when it's dressed up as policy." Silence. A third airport official, a woman this time, approached with a folder in her hands. She seemed out of breath. "Sir, we're reviewing the footage now. Would you and your wife be willing to speak with our head of security?" Tanya stood. "Now you want to listen." Her voice wasn't angry. It was steady, even, measured. "You didn't listen when I was calm. You didn't listen when I explained myself. You only started listening when you saw who my husband was." Jensen took a step back. "That's not what this is about." "But it is," Tanya said. "That's exactly what it's about." But Tanya wasn't alone. Not for long. The small conference room they were led to had nothing but a long table, 6 chairs, and a mounted screen on the wall. Neutral colors. No warmth. Just sterile air and tightly sealed windows. Tanya and Maurice sat across from 2 security officers, and a woman in a dark blazer with her ID badge flipped backward, the lettering too small to read anyway. The woman introduced herself as Lynn Ortega, Director of Passenger Relations for the airport. She had the voice of someone trained to sound calm under pressure, but her fingers tapped restlessly on the table. "We've reviewed a portion of the footage," she said, gesturing toward the screen. "And we'd like to share it with you both." Morris crossed his arms. "We're not here to view footage. We're here because my wife was humiliated, removed, and treated like a threat over a bag. You've seen enough of it. So tell us, what did the video show?" Ortega took a breath. It shows that the gate agent escalated prematurely. Your wife remained calm. She was not physically aggressive. She didn't raise her voice. She clearly stated she had medical items in her bag. Morris glanced at Tanya, then back. So why was security called? I don't have a good answer for that, Ortega admitted. Tanya leaned forward. I do, because I didn't back down. I didn't act scared. I didn't say yes, sir, and let him walk all over me. No one in the room said anything. Morris reached into his case and pulled out a slim folder. Here's a formal request for all internal reports related to the incident, including employee statements, communications, and a copy of the footage. Understood, Ortega said, her tone shifting slightly. He didn't stop there. And I'd like the names of everyone who made the decision to remove my wife. I'm not filing a complaint. I'm building a record. There's a difference. The words were heavy. No threats, no theatrics, just precision. Tanya didn't speak. She didn't need to. Morris was in control now, but not the kind of control that demanded silence. The kind that made the room pay attention. I want to be clear, he continued. This isn't about getting someone fired. This is about a pattern. My wife is not the first black woman to be treated like a problem before she's treated like a person. You've got agents with too much discretion and not enough training. This isn't a one-time issue. It's a structural one. Ortega looked down at her notes. We take these concerns seriously. I'm sure you do. When there's a paper trail, when a lawyer walks in, when someone starts talking about media involvement. But what about the people who don't have someone to speak for them? One of the security officers shifted uncomfortably. Morris continued. Do you know what would have happened if Tanya had raised her voice even once? No answer. She would have been restrained, probably banned from the airline, her name flagged, and the version of this story you'd tell wouldn't sound anything like the truth, Ortega said. We want to make this right, Tanya finally spoke. Then stop acting like it's just a mistake. You all keep calling it an unfortunate incident. It's not. It's the result of a system that sees people like me as threats when we're just standing our ground. Ortega nodded, slowly this time. I hear you. Morris's expression didn't change. You hear us because you're cornered. Outside the room, the low hum of announcements echoed through the corridor. A flight to Austin was boarding. Someone was paging a passenger over the loudspeaker. Life went on, unbothered, unfazed. But inside this room, something had shifted. I'll be contacting the local press, Morris added as he stood. And when they ask why my wife was escorted out without cause, I'll hand them your report. Let them read the part where your own video confirms her story. Ortega stood as well, her words slower now. We'll be issuing a formal apology, immediately. That's a start, Tanya said. But Morris wasn't just looking for an apology. He was about to turn everything upside down. They didn't walk back into the terminal like victims. Tanya held her head high. Morris walked beside her, not ahead, not behind. Equal stride, equal weight. You could feel the change before anyone said a word. The same people who had watched Tanya get escorted out now stared again. But differently. Some with recognition, some with shame. Some, now recording with quiet urgency, phones raised but silent. The first person to approach them wasn't security. It was a man in a grey polo with a radio clipped to his belt. Mr. Miles? He asked. I'm Director Kent, Airport Operations. Morris didn't shake his hand. I'm listening. Kent cleared his throat. We've decided to temporarily place the gate agent involved on leave, pending an internal investigation. Tanya's voice cut in. Does that mean someone finally told him he was wrong? We're reviewing the full context of the interaction. No, she said, sharper now. I want to hear you say it. I wasn't wrong. He was. Kent hesitated, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. Based on what we've seen so far, he mishandled the situation. For the first time all day, Tanya smiled. Not because she was happy, but because someone finally said the quiet part out loud. We've also arranged for you both to fly first class on the next available flight, Kent added. No charge, of course. Morris raised an eyebrow. We didn't ask for perks. I know. It's a gesture. Tanya cut him off. Don't hand me silence all morning and then offer a seat upgrade like it evens out. That's not what this is about. Kent stepped back. Understood. And just like that, every interaction shifted. Other passengers began to speak. I saw what happened, said a woman near gate B6. You handled it with so much grace. I was really sorry to see it. A young man with a laptop bag nodded. I was on that flight. The way he treated you, it was wrong. One by one, people started coming forward. Not all at once, but steadily. Stories came with them. Quiet conversations. A man mentioned how his wife had been detained for questioning once because she looked nervous in line. A grandmother said her teenage grandson was kicked off a flight for walking back to his seat too slow. Tanya listened. Maurice took notes. He wasn't collecting sympathy. He was building a case. Then a reporter appeared. Short hair, notepad, and the kind of calm tone that meant she'd been tipped off. Mr. and Mrs. Miles, would you mind speaking on camera? Tanya looked at Maurice. He said nothing, just glanced at her. The decision was hers. I will, she replied. But not because I want attention. Because I want people to understand what it feels like to be made invisible. To be treated like a threat before anyone even asks you what's going on. The reporter turned to her cameraman, gave a quick nod, and they began recording. Tanya stood in the exact spot where she'd been removed just 2 hours earlier. The same polished floor, the same row of seats. But this time, no one was calling security. No one was pretending not to see. She spoke clearly. Not with anger, but with truth. I came here to fly to Phoenix for work. I followed every rule. I stood in line like everyone else. But because I didn't accept what felt unfair, I was treated like a problem, not a person. I want people to ask themselves, would this have happened if I looked different? If my voice didn't sound the way it does? If I'd been standing here with someone who looked like my husband from the start? The terminal was quiet as an airport gets. People watched, not just with curiosity, but with a kind of quiet guilt that hits when you know you might have stayed silent too. Morris didn't say a word. He let Tanya speak. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It never had been. The interview lasted 5 minutes, but it was enough. Enough for the local station to run the clip that evening. Enough for it to get picked up online by the morning. But Morris knew this wasn't just about Tanya anymore. By the time their story aired that night on KPXE Channel 9, it had already been reposted on 3 local Facebook pages, shared by a former classmate of Tanya's she hadn't spoken to in 15 years, and clipped into a 90-second TikTok by a college student who'd been 2 gates away. The headline was blunt. Black woman removed from flight over carry-on dispute. Airport reviewing policy. After husband demands accountability. It spread fast, and with it came voices. Some supportive, some defensive. Some angry, some relieved someone had finally said what they'd felt for years. And then there were the emails, hundreds of them, most from people Tanya and Maurice didn't know. One came from an older woman in Tallahassee. I cried watching your interview. My daughter went through the same thing at LaGuardia. We stayed quiet. I wish we hadn't. Another from a man in Oregon. I've worked airline security for 18 years. What happened to your wife is more common than people think. Please don't let them sweep it under the rug. The conversation wasn't just about Tanya anymore. It was about policies. It was about power. It was about the quickness with which people made decisions based not on behavior, but assumptions. 2 days later, Morris was invited to speak on a local panel about civil rights and public service interactions. Tanya didn't go. She needed time to herself, but she watched the broadcast. Morris didn't use her name. He didn't talk about what happened in front of Gate B6. Instead, he talked about silence. How many people have watched something wrong happen right in front of them and did nothing because they were afraid of being disruptive? He asked. Let me say this clearly. Silence doesn't keep you safe. It just protects the people doing harm. The moderator, a professor from Arizona State, nodded solemnly. So what's the fix, Maurice? There's no single fix, he said. But it starts with accountability, with policy changes, with retraining, and maybe most importantly, believing people when they tell you how they were treated, even when there's no camera rolling. Back home, Tanya sat at the kitchen counter with a mug of tea and scrolled through her inbox. She stopped on one message from a woman in Ohio. It read, "I work for an airline. We just had a staff meeting this morning where your story came up. Our supervisor played the clip. I watched the room change. You changed the room." She read it 3 times. Then she replied with 2 simple words. "Thank you." The next morning, Tanya received a phone call from a woman named Marlene Alvarez, a representative from a non-profit that advocated for travelers' rights. She wanted to know if Tanya would consider sharing her story at a roundtable discussion in Sacramento. "I'm not a speaker," Tanya said, her voice light but unsure. "You don't have to be," Marlene replied. "You just have to be honest. And you already are," Tanya told her she'd think about it. That night, she sat with Morris on their back patio. The moon was out, and the sky was clear. "I never wanted all this attention," she said. "I know," he replied. "But I also don't want to pretend it didn't happen. You shouldn't." There was a long pause. Then she added, "I just don't want people to remember me as the woman who got kicked off a flight. I want them to remember that I said something, that I stood up." Maurice reached over and took her hand. "They will." But even with attention, there was still something personal left to say. 2 weeks later, Tanya stood on a small stage at the Travel Equity Forum in Sacramento, California. Not because she wanted the spotlight, but because she'd finally decided it was time. The room wasn't packed. Just 100 people, maybe less. Airline workers, advocates, journalists, a few passengers who had their own stories, and one man in the back with a camera, recording for a live stream. She wore a navy blouse and black pants. No microphone in her hand, just a small clip on her collar. The moderator introduced her briefly, then stepped aside. Tanya didn't clear her throat, didn't shuffle papers. She just looked up. "When I walked into that airport in Raleigh, I didn't expect anything unusual. I had a meeting. I had my suitcase. I had everything in order." A pause. "But what I didn't have was the benefit of the doubt." The room was still. Every seat leaned in just a little. I didn't yell. I didn't insult anyone. I asked a question. I gave a reason. But instead of being heard, I was labeled. Not for what I said, but for how I looked. And the scary part? It happened fast. Quicker than you realize. She told the story. Not with fire, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She described how the gate agent raised his voice before she raised hers. How security never asked her side of the story. How her name wasn't written in any report as someone worth listening to, until her husband arrived. "And that's what hurts the most," she said. "That I needed credentials standing next to me to be treated like a human being." A quiet murmur ran through the crowd. People glanced at one another. "I'm not here today to ruin anyone's job. I'm not here for attention. I'm here because I've lived with that moment. And I know others have too. And I'm tired of pretending that we have to accept it just to keep peace." She looked down, just for a second, then back up. "You know what kept me up that night?" she asked. Not the embarrassment, not the news coverage. It was the fact that not one person in that boarding line spoke up. Not one. The silence in the room deepened. Maybe they were scared. Maybe they didn't know what to say. But let me say this now, so no one wonders next time. If you see someone being treated unfairly, speak. If you see someone being humiliated, ask why. You don't need a degree or a badge to do the right thing. Marlene Alvarez sat near the front, tears in her eyes. Tanya went on. She spoke about how her daughter asked why people don't always believe black women. She spoke about how long it took her to feel like herself again. And she spoke about choice. You don't always choose how people see you, but you can choose how you respond. You can choose to speak when it's easier to stay quiet. And maybe that choice helps someone else feel less alone. When she finished, there wasn't an immediate burst of applause. Just a pause, the kind that lingers after something real is said. Then the room stood, slowly. not out of politeness, but because they felt it. Afterward, a young flight attendant came up to her. "I've seen things," she said quietly. "I didn't speak up, but I will now." Tanya smiled. Not big, not dramatic, just a small nod of understanding. Later, she and Morris sat in their hotel room, watching the sunset through the window. "You were brilliant," he said. "I was honest," she replied. "That's harder." They didn't need to say much more, because the truth had already been spoken, and the right people had heard it. And if there's one thing this moment taught us, it's that how we treat someone when we think they're nobody says everything. If you believe in fairness, dignity, and the power of standing up, don't just feel it. Say something. Share this story. Speak up when it matters. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that challenge, connect, and remind us who we are.